So today we're speaking with Amish Tripathi and Nouredine. They're the co-founders of Tara Gaming, a gaming studio that recently announced the Age of Bhaarat. Based on the press release, it's a dark fantasy action adventure RPG for PC and consoles. And starting with Amish, among many achievements, he's best known for having written 11 books since about 2010, with over 7 million copies sold. This includes the famous Shiva trilogy, which many of you have probably read. Along with Amish in this venture are Nouredine Abboud. He's the former executive producer of Ghost Recon Wildlands and the CEO of Novaquark. And of course, the legendary Bollywood actor Amitabh Bachchan, whose unmistakable voice was the one that narrated their game's first trailer. Over the next 30 to 60 minutes, the three of us are going to try and unpack a variety of topics surrounding the game and the state of video games in India. Folks, first of all, super excited to have you here on this chat with me, right? If you could just take a couple of minutes to tell us a little bit about yourselves and maybe answer the big burning question, which is why gaming, right? And maybe that's a little more relevant for Amish since Nouredine, you've been in the gaming space for a while now.
Yes. So I've been doing games for many years. I've made smaller games. I've worked on my own studio. I worked on very big games like the one you mentioned, Ghost Recon Wildlands. I worked on other Ghost Recon games. I worked on the Driver franchise, on the Brother in Arms franchise. I worked for a few years in a company called Ubisoft. To make it very simple, my job in entertainment is really to focus on, let's say, very big games. And previously, I had the opportunity of see the entertainment landscape evolve since the 90s because I was in media. I worked also in the music. And when we had discussions internally at one stage about opportunities and collaborations that could show up, at one stage, the idea of working on a project about India and all the famous Indian epics came around. And I had the feeling that there was an opportunity to do basically two things. One, to create an incredible game and an incredible series of game and even an incredible franchise about the big Indian epics and all those stories. And also the opportunity to work with incredible talent. And it can be, let's say, very mature, very high-level talent like Amitabh or Amish, but also, let's say, rookies, more junior talent. And so at the same time, we are right now building a big studio in India. And so our goal is to come with the opportunity to grow the talent. And I made you this introduction about myself and about the project, but it was also a way to intro Amish so that he can talk about him, but also about the opportunity to join this adventure in the realm of gaming.
Fantastic. Amish, I'd love to hear from you. You've been, dabbling in the arts and entertainment for a while now, mostly through books and then shows, right? Why video games?
Look, there's a rational reason and there's an emotional reason. The rational reason, if you think about it, I used to be a banker. I did my MBA from IIM Calcutta, and among the perfect opportunities is having the right product at the right place at the right time. I'm not a gamer. I have to be honest. I used to play, Donkey Kong, and that there was that shooting game, Wolf or something, when I was a kid, and Tetris. So I was never a serious gamer. So I had no idea how big gaming was as an industry. I mean, it is bigger than movies, books, music, theater, performances combined. It is massive. So in terms of product, it's the perfect, place to get into. It's also something that is suited for the kind of storytelling style that India has. We have an ideal narrative style to build a high-end video game. So that's the right product, right place. It's often forgotten that India began its economic reform some 12 years after China. We destroyed our economy with socialism a lot longer than China did. So when you look at India today, you have to compare it with how China was maybe 15 years ago, right? And that was the stage, if you remember, when China just took off, right? Um, I think we are at that stage where the per capita income is reaching a stage where many products that didn't have a market earlier suddenly have a market. Like in gaming, it used to be believed that you can only thrive in mobile gaming in India, which, as you know, has large unit numbers, but the revenue is not that big. But to draw an example from another industry, who would have thought that you could have theater in India where you could sell tickets for the equivalent of 250 pounds, 25,000 rupees? But you do have that now, right? So the market is opening up. Our per capita income is reaching that place. So it's a right place. Um, and the right time, because the kind of changes that are happening in the global arena in geopolitics, with the challenges between the US and China. China as a market is drying up for the US. They are looking for the next big market, many in the West, and India has that perfect opportunity. We can grab it to capture much of the entertainment dollars as well. That's a rational reason. The emotional reason is actually very simple. My son is 16 years old. He loves gaming. He reads my books. His friends also read my books. But now suddenly I'm a cool guy in his eyes. Okay. So when I was approached by Nicola and Nouredine, do you want to work on a game? I called my son. He said, Dad, you have to do it. It's the coolest thing to do. And he sees me differently. It's a very deep emotional reason to get into it. My son thinks I'm cool, man.
I think that's a lot more powerful reason than any rational business
Oh yeah,
justification can ever give you.
that's why I saved it for the end.
Fair, fair. Right. Let me double click on that a bit, right? So Nicola and Nouredine reached out to you. How did the conversation reach Amitabh Bachchan ji and how did he get involved? I'd love to hear that story.
So we were thinking of I'm much more closely involved, not just in the narrative, but in everything. And we were thinking at one level of just who could we have who could do the voiceover for the trailer that would take it to a whole new level. And I thought the absolute top end, there's no one better than Amitabh ji. Luckily, I've known him for many years. He's launched my books. He reads and likes my books. His blurbs are on my books. He's tweeted on my books very often. So he's read most of my books. So I know him. So I made the initial approach that Amitabh ji, would you be interested in something like this? And he also expressed interest because Abhishek, his son, is also an avid gamer. He asked for a meeting, and so Nicola flew down from London. Both of us went and met him. Amitabh ji loved the project and the rough cut of the trailer and the narrative design, etc., that we had. And what was most exciting was he said, "Listen, I don't want to just." Be one part of it. I want to be a part of the entire game. I want to be, kind of a co-founder. And for us, that was like, I mean, a gift from the heavens. Yeah, we asked just for one partnership, and he thought because he thought there's a rocking idea and an idea whose time has come. So we are delighted, honored, ecstatic that someone of he's a living legend, and there are artists and there are superstars, and then there's a living legend, and he's a living legend. He's beyond all statuses. So it's such an honor that he's a part of this project.
Agreed. And his dedication to work despite having achieved so much at his age is
Oh
it's
yeah.
inspiring and enviable, I must say, right?
Nishant, look, Noordine's a French guy, so he's normally always on time, very disciplined. But you know how we Indians are, right? And we have an Indian standard time, broadly here and there. But Amitabh ji, he's what? He's 80. He's achieved everything that you could achieve. We had a meeting and at like I think it was 3 p.m. and I had told Nicola that when Amitabh ji says 3 p.m., he'll be there at 2:55. So we made sure we were there at 2:45. 2:55, he walks in, right? He's so disciplined, focused. He'd given us, half an hour, stuck with us for an hour, chatted, questioned. What an inspiring man. Seriously.
Very cool. And just before I move on to the next topic, right? You mentioned that Abhishek Bachchan is also an avid gamer. This isn't a very well-known fact among the gaming community, I must say. You have
Hmm.
any more insights or information to share about that? What does he
No,
play?
not very deep, but he told me that he loves gaming. So not very deep, no.
All right.
I will add you, Nishant, also, as I've been making games for many, many years, and I've been working with, let's say, many very talented people outside of the game industry. Basically, I've spent my years either working with junior kids and growing the ecosystem, or convincing people outside of gaming to come and bring their talent. It can be actors, it can be writers, but and to be very open, is the first time I'm doing something with talent in India. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is I can tell you there's one thing in common. 100% of the people that I convinced to join us in the adventure of gaming at one stage talk to me about their son. And as you know, I worked with Don Winslow, a famous writer on Ghost Recon. We had a long discussion about his son, etc., etc. So I will add to this discussion, which is, I think in general, it tells a lot about, let's say, the opportunities of gaming, but also the fact that gaming is still, let's say, in limbo in some aspect. Many people say, okay, I love gaming, but my kids love it even much more than me. And I think this is for us, and again, I'm saying it as a general element. I think it tells a lot about, I think, two things. A little bit maybe of the social stigma. I think there's a little bit of point of view when you're a successful businessman or successful artist or creative. Sometimes it's complicated to say, okay, by the way, I'm also a gamer. But it also tells a lot about where the culture is happening nowadays. And we like it or not, basically you have a bigger loudspeaker when you're talking through gaming, because that's where the people are. But the funny thing, I'm a little bit younger than Amitabh or some of the people you mentioned, but I'm still 51 years old, so I can be considered old by some people. It's been like that since I was 20 years old. Things haven't changed. I've seen the things in the 80s, 90s. So I wonder, that's where I want to go. Maybe it's going to be the case all the time. Maybe people will always say, I like gaming, but my kids love it much better because of some of the stigma. So I think it's an interesting topic, and it's not just linked to India or to Amitabh or Amish. I think it's the situation of entertainment worldwide nowadays.
I hear you. And, two thoughts come to mind when you bring this up. The first is, since if you have kids that are gamers, not only are they your biggest supporters and inspiration, but they're also going to be your loudest critics. So you damn well better make something that's good enough for them before you release it to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the second thought that comes to mind, right, when Nouredine talks about how, children are always going to be a lot more entrenched in this gaming space. When we were growing up as gamers, it was a lot harder to convince our parents and our peers that, hey, there's an industry here, and hey, I'm trying to actually build something here in this space. Heck, I know I had to have that battle to even consider starting something in gaming, right? It's a lot easier today. And especially with folks like you leading the charge, building games that are exporting culture from India to the world, I think you're playing a very important role in eliminating that stigma that gaming is a bad thing. So yeah, props
on
to you
this,
guys.
I can tell you something that actually two things. First, I did my first development with talent in India around 2008. I was working at the time at Ubisoft, and I was building up a team in Pune on one of my games, and which actually where is located our team right now. But the first time I was facing the topic of building a team in Pune, it was in 2008. And yes, I can tell you that since 2008, things have changed a lot. But on the other hand, I would also tell you that I remember, and I coded my first game when I was 11 years old. So we're talking 1985. And at the time, the way my parents were controlling my usage of my computer is that they were stealing the cable connecting the screen to basically the mainframe. But they didn't know that I had a bunch of cables hidden. I bought some cables for free, for cheap. So I could code at night even if the cable wasn't there. And nowadays we do that by controlling, I use Q Studio as a tool to limit the screen time of my kids. So I think there's also another topic here, which is actually not really linked even to social stigma or not even linked to business, which is just linked to the time spent. And yes, gaming tends to generate, I wouldn't call that addiction because I don't think it's that, but let's say passion. And there's a limit to how much sport you can do in a day, maybe because you're gonna get tired. But sometimes you can spend the same way you can spend 20 hours binge watching something on Netflix, you can spend 20 hours playing something. And so I think that this is probably never going to change, even in 100 years, you won't be stealing the cable or you won't be using QStudio, but you will always be trying to teach to your kids that everything comes with a dose of measurement. And so I think all those things are right now mixed up in people's mind, be it in India or outside of India. And I'm happy that with the project we are doing, working with Amish, working with Amitabh, working with Indian epics, we can bring a positive point of view about those things. And yes, if your kids end up spending 10 hours playing our game, let's have them learn stories about India, learn about the culture of India, and even hear the voice of somebody like Amitabh. And so I think we'll have a different point of view on what some people call addiction.
Yeah. And Nishant, if I may add, I think Nouredine makes an important point among the kind of socio-cultural changes. I don't know what your age is, Nishant. I'm 50. When I was growing up, there was no question of having the money for PlayStations and things. We simply didn't have the money. I grew up in a very humble background. That obviously puts um restrictions on your enjoyment of a game, right? I mean, the first games, like I said, that I would have played would be those simple computer Tetris or something, which aren't really that awesome. So at that age, when I had the time, we simply didn't have the money for the kind of great games that could generate passion. But the second thing, I think one of the things that the parents think about is if my child is playing so much on a game, what are the kind of things that he or she is learning from that? And if our impression is basically just randomly going around, killing people in that, and there's no learning, then that builds a worry in the back of the mind, right? And I think that's where what we are doing with this game is so different. I don't know if you've read my books, Nishant, but look, my books speak of our traditional stories, but in a modern, cool way. And most of my readers are actually the youth.
Yeah.
And which is why you'll find even the parents don't mind their children reading my books as compared to uh, some romance novels which may get a little too risque, as you know, right? But my books aren't considered controversial. The parents don't mind it if my books are there
Yeah.
but the kids also enjoy it because it's cool, it's fun, but they are connected to their roots. This is precisely how this game will also be. It will be cool, it'll be fun, but it'll be set in our world. And what I love most about Noordin and Nicola, the way they are approaching this game. Look, they're Westerners. They don't know much about India. But I know we Indians have felt it. Many times Westerners come to our culture without a sense of respect. Noordin comes with that sense of respect, and he keeps saying, I want to do things which Indians will like, which will give them a sense of pride. And that is at the heart of what we are doing. In that sense, the attitude will be very similar to my books or documentaries. Proudly connected to our traditions and culture, but very cool, very cutting edge. So it'll hopefully make the kids who will play the games and the parents, both of them, it'll make them both of them happy.
Awesome. Look, I'm not going to give away my age here, okay? But I think what I will say and might give you some hints is, as a recently turned father, right? This is something that occupies my thoughts as well quite a bit about the difference between productive screen time, entertaining screen time, and then purely detrimental screen time, right? And when I reflect back on my own journey as a youth with uncontrolled screen time, there were the goods and the bads. But the goods were I learned I managed to get a command over language because of watching things like cartoons and playing
Hmm.
video games, right? Words and phrases that I would have never been exposed to otherwise. I learned through video game dialogue. hand-eye coordination, problem solving, strategic thinking, all of this I credit to multiplayer competitive video games that played a very important role in my life. And I hear you when you say that you're building a game that, yes, the screen time problem is real. It's hard to control it in today's children and whatnot, right? But as long as you can start shaping an environment, a digital environment wherein you're doing something productive, you're actually learning while actually investing a lot of time into something entertaining, right? I think you're on the right track then.
That's clearly what the attempt is. Like I said, I must say this again. Nicola and Nourdine, they are Westerners, right? But they are coming in with that respect, which I really like as an Indian, and which is what I think will reflect in our game. And that's something that Amitabh ji also told me, that I like the fact that they are coming in with that sense of respect towards our culture.
Right. And Amish, just to go back to your books, right? I have read the Shiva trilogy, and I must say that prior to that, I was someone that couldn't give a damn, right, about history and epics and whatnot. Of course, there were interesting stories that always piqued my interest, and you'd hear from your grandparents and your parents about cool stories and all. But it wasn't relatable because it was all told to me in a way that the dinosaurs in my house were talking about it. And your books really brought a youth perspective on it, a modern take on it, and I think it's cool that you're trying to bring that to video games today in collaboration with guys like Nouredine, right? So kudos to you for that. Let me jump into a question that's on the top of my head, right? Ever since I heard this announcement, most folks jump into Indian game development saying that, hey, the mobile gaming opportunity is huge in India. And, while there may be a lot of players, there aren't many payers, but we can find ways around that to monetize and yada yada. You've taken a different approach. You've categorically stated you want to build a AAA game. You want it to be for PCs and for consoles, right? My thinking when I hear that announcement is, one, your target audience is not just India. Sure, it's an Indian game, but you're trying to take it to the world. And two, you're going to need a lot of money and a lot of talented people, which India may not have today. How are you solving these?
There's two things in what you said. One where I'm going to repeat what you said, and one bit where we'll bring you our point of view and specifically my point of view on the talent. Yes, you're right. We are not only targeting India. Yes, you're right. It's a big budget. And I will add so now two things. One, it's also a time frame. Just to be very open, there's always what we call short-term business opportunities and longer term. My understanding is that there are some players who focus on the short term. To be very open, if your goal is to be open, lots of money, but also if your goal is to have a lasting impact, you need to look at the long term. So obviously, yes, if we look at the market of India in the next few months, some of the figures you mentioned are more toward mobiles. But yes, we are not only looking for the next few months, we are trying to have a longer point of view. And exactly, it's what Amish described initially about if you compare India to China, etc. So I can tell you that, yes, we are not only going to sell our game in India, but to be very open, we are also going to sell it heavily in India. It really depends about the time frame. Now, very specifically about your question about talent, I would say this. First, I mentioned the first time I was thinking about talent in India was in 2008. And to be open, I had a bigger team. I started looking at the topic in 2008, and I had lots of people working on a project for me in 2010. So it was 15 years ago. So I would have agreed about what you said in 2010. I remember in 2010, when I was discussing about local professionals, it was more difficult to retain talent, social stigma, not enough money at stake, lots of people who prefer to work in classic IT, high turnover in the industry, etc. Now, flash forward in 2025. We have 4 important parameters. One, to be very open, we're only making one game. So, we are, no matter how many people I'm going to hire, I don't need to hire 10,000 people. We are talking, let's say, hundreds, but because of the size of India, I can tell you, hiring hundreds of talented Indians in that space is fully doable. Is it possible to hire 50,000? I don't know, but good news, I'm just making one game. And I can tell you that the talent is there. And why is the talent there? For two sub-reasons. One, some of the talent has more experience in mobile, but is actually in reality playing PC and console games. So they are using their talent in the mobile space, but they also have developed skills outside of that. So we don't only hire people who have shipped in that space, but also, let's face it, right now you do have lots of companies who do subcontracting in India, who have offices in India. And so the people are not able to contribute, let's say, to the core of the game, but they are actually working on PC and console assets. And I can tell you that when we come with our idea of working on a game about Indian epics, working with Amitabh, working with Amish, and with goals in the PC and console space, finding those people is not that complicated because they are quite happy, let's say, to join us. And four, I'm going to get back to what I said initially, the long-term vision. So let's face it, we are not just building a game, we are building a series of games, and we're not just building a series of games, we are also looking at entertainment in general. And so we have plans right now, not just for the first game, but also for the previous games. Explained like that, it might seem a little bit crazy, but again, I've worked on big games in the past. When I look at what I was doing with the Ghost Recon franchise, I remember when I had the opportunity to reboot the Ghost Recon franchise and how we moved forward. If you look at the things in the long term and if you have a vision, it's all about, let's say, time. And so we also believe that we are going to also build a leadership in our teams in India. So right now we have, just to be very down to earth, we are around 30 people in our studio in Pune. The person who is leading, so in our conversation, Amish has mentioned Niklas, who's working with us as a chairman on the business side. And I will also mention Siddharth Singh, who's working with us in Pune as the studio lead of Pune. So he's been in the industry for many, many years. He's worked on big games, etc. And so there are people like Siddharth, and the people who are in our studio in Pune right now have between 10 and 25 years of experience. And so that's why I'm getting back to what I said. In 2010, those people had 0 years of experience. In 2025, I'm able to hire people between 10 and 25 years of XP. And actually not just hiring them, but put them in control of the project. Obviously, it's going to happen step by step because we are building the studio and it's difficult to do two things at the same time, build the studio and lead a project. But we are not just using talent that is available, we are also growing our own talent. So in a nutshell, I think the biggest reason why right now those things are not happening, our claim is unleashing Indian epics in AAA gaming. And I think this is not happening right now just for one reason, is because people are not thinking about it. And on the other hand, if you start with this goal, all of a sudden the pieces of the puzzle get together. And I dare to say that the landscape has changed a lot in the last 15 years.
Excellent. That's quite encouraging, I must say. Can you share a little bit about the current stage of development and what the projected timeline is like specifically for the Age of Bhaarat?
So it's very simple. You mentioned we released the trailer, and the trailer has a few words on the screen, and one of the words on the screen is pre-alpha. So we are pre-alpha. So what does it mean, pre-alpha? We are not yet alpha, which is the whole game finished but not polished, and we are not yet beta, which is the whole game finished and polished and not yet obviously released. On the other hand, what is already done, we've completed what we call the conception, so the ideas, and the pre-production, which is setting up all the pipeline. And right now we are in pre-alpha phase. In terms of number of people, it means that we are right now north of 100 people working on the project. which is, it's at this stage still a very small team for the sort of project we're doing, but already starting to be a big enough team to be able to move forward. For the timeline itself, to be open, what we will not do is commit at this stage on a time frame. For one reason is because, as Amish mentioned, we will not ship a game that is not at the highest level. You also mentioned kids tend to be very critical. And so we cannot say we want to unleash Indian epics in AAA gaming and come with an average game. And what you know when you are a game maker is that predicting excellence is easier when you're close to it. So I would say that we are on the same time frame of usual AAA games, let's say between 2 to 5 years time frames. We've already been in the project for more than a year. When we will be ready to announce the release date, we will do it. However, and that's the last thing I will say on this, we are very busy right now moving forward. And what does it mean moving forward? When you are pre-alpha, you have basically an idea of your game. What you have your basic pipelines. You haven't started creating the final assets. So I will give you one example. You are using temporary animations. You want to have an overview of the whole game, but you need to use temporary animations because going into mocap, so basically recording the movements of the actors, doesn't make sense when you're in conception and pre-production. So right now, one of our next steps is to actually start working with mocap studios, motion capture studios, and recording the movements of the combat, of the people who are fighting in the game, of the actors, etc. So this is one of the steps that we are going to do. And this way, I hope you have an understanding of where we are and where we are going.
No, this is cool. I think there's been a lot of claims of late within the industry of studios aiming to make AAA games, but few seem to be as grounded about what it actually takes, right? You seem to be checking all the boxes because a game like Black Myth Wukong, for example, right, took what north of $70 million to make, about 7 years, a team of about 300 odd people. And what you're saying kind of resonates with what it took them, right? It's going to take you up to 5 years. It's going to take a few hundreds of talented people. You're going to have to build some talent in house to get this done as well. So I think it's cool that you're one of the few that's not saying, "Hey, I'm building a AAA game," and then launching in like 1.5 year, and then there's just you've thrown crap on the wall and it didn't stick. So I'm glad that you're not taking that approach. Um, what I also wanted to ask is, how are you guys, the three of you co-founders, dividing up the work, right? And I'll come to my second part of that question later, but let me first understand, how you guys are divvying up the work between the three of you.
So just to be very clear, and here I'm going to relate to what you just said. Games take hundreds of people. And so let's be clear. We are talking about the co-founders, Nouredine, Amish, and Amitabh. Let's be clear. The development of the game is not Nouredine, Amish, and Amitabh meeting 3 times a day and deciding about the game. That this I want to be clear.
Of course, yeah.
Obviously, because we are in the field of entertainment. The reason why we are mentioning those 3 names is that they all have some impact in their field. Obviously, Amitabh is a legend, not just in his field, but in general. Amish, he is very strong in the field, and the fact that you mentioned that his writings made you change your perspective about some of the stories of India shows the long-lasting impact that Amish has in his field. And my only claim to fame would be that I had the opportunity of making AAA games in the past. That said, there's many people working on the project. We mentioned Niklas, who's working with us on the business side, development, etc., who's traveling a lot to India and working with Amish and Amitabh. But apart even from those names, Siddharth, who's leading our studio in Pune, I have right now more than 100 people working in the pipeline of the game. So I would try to be able to answer to your question in a very simple way. Everybody is working in his line. So when we are discussing with Amish, we are talking about his understanding and his deep knowledge of India, Indian epics, the storytelling, our even let's be direct, our marketing approach, because he knows how to talk to about this topic. Obviously, when we're interacting with Amitabh, it's about his field of understanding India, the stories, also about voice acting, and also anything linked to basically cinema, which is his field. And so that's basically the bit between Amish, Amitabh, myself, and the other part, and that's how I want to phrase it. Every game team who thought one day that star power, no matter what it is in the game industry, would compensate what we call production pipelines, made a mistake. And at the core of the day-to-day development of this project, there is a production pipeline. And what does it mean? It's as simple as that. We follow basic game development practices. One of them is having what we call sprints. So basically, we've divided production into 2 weeks period. Every 2 weeks, we look at how the game is progressing, and we have company-wide meetings and decisions. And in those decisions, let's be very open. The people who have the biggest say are not really even me or even Amish or even Abhidab. It's actually the people who are making the games. So when it comes to our talent in India, it's a Siddharth. When it comes to our tech, it's tech people, etc. I'll give you one specific example. We have a guy in our team called Tushar Patil. He's worked for many years at Ubisoft. He's very important for us on the tech side in India. And obviously, for me, listening to his feedback about where we are going with the game development is a very important thing on a regular basis.
Great answer. Now I have to ask a very silly question. Is Amitabh Bachchan going to be a playable character in your game? Is he going to voice over a character?
Answer very precisely to your question. What we have communicated about is that in this game, you'll be able to customize your character. And maybe you have seen that the last thing you see at the end of the trailer is the logo. And in this logo, we have 4 characters showing up, male, female, and different kind of weapons. This image is very important because, and here I'm going to get down to what you said about kids. Nowadays, kids, when they play games, they're very, let's say, they put their soul in the game. But the big difference with other media is they can create actually the experience. And so for us, it's very important that, like in some of the most successful games on the market, our players will be able to create the character they want. And so the core of this game is, when it comes to character, is what we call agency. So the capability of creating your own character and being able to play with your character in the game. That said, yes, Amitabh is going to have a role, like Amish said, very initially, not just as a co-founder helping us about the story and the world, not just as the person who's voiced the trailer, but as somebody who's going to bring his artistic skills inside the game. Exactly in what format is it going to happen? It's not something we want to talk at this stage, mainly just to be very open, mainly because of the process that I just listed, which is it's never good to talk about things until they have not been done. But I really insist on this because, and actually, even the people who listen to the podcast, if they want very, very down to earth, very precise answer to their questions, not just about how the game is done, but let's say the content of the game, looking at the page we have on Steam or the page we have on the Epic Game Store. The game is PC and console, but we already have a page on Steam and Epic Game. We have a fully detailed description of the game features. And so for me, it was very important for the people to understand that even if we show a trailer with one character, one weapon, you will be able to customize your character. And which means that no matter how much agency and character customization your kids want, and I'm sure if you ask your kids, they will tell you that, you can tell them and look straight in their eyes, yes, in the Age of Bhaarat, you will be able to create the character of your dreams.
Hey, why just limit that to kids, right? Like, I mean, I'm personally one of those that'll spend hours in Skyrim or Elden Ring just making sure my characters is picture perfect before I actually step out into the game, right? So I think that's a value proposition that appeals to more than just kids.
But because you didn't want to reveal your age, Nishan. Maybe I thought you were still a kid.
Touche. All right. Um, let's double click on the game a little bit, right? I believe we have another 10-15 minutes to go. So let me ask a couple of game related questions here. Um, you've talked about character customization, and it sounds like there's a lot there already. You revealed some of the grappling hook gameplay for in-world traversal. What can players expect in terms of combat, in terms of story, in terms of strategic thinking? Any sort of hints and teasers you can give us about what to expect would be lovely.
And here I'm going to be, again, you mentioned we are really talking about the game. I'm going to get a little bit technical. Um, in the field of high stake action games, and if you look right away at the market nowadays, people tend to refer to this category as Souls-like, and so close to a game called Dark Souls. And in the Souls-like genre, um, which tends to, let's say, blur the boundaries with what we call action adventure games. You could say, okay, Lara Croft was an action adventure game, or God of War was an action adventure game. Now, in the Souls-like segment, has some very specificities, usually linked to difficulty, replay value, etc. I warned you, I will be getting very technical. Um, However, that said, if you look at in those genres, the games, basically, you can say that the game are either, let's say, very fast, very, let's of dynamic combat on one side of the scale. And on the other side of the scale, some games are, let's say, slower. It's more about tactical positioning. Um, as you can see in the trailer, we want to do two things. One, we want to show elements about Indian culture, and so I mentioned mocap. We are about to start recording the animations and the movements of basically Indian combat techniques and basically combat style. And so we want something that is able to capture the local combat moves for local martial art, basically. And at the same time, we want to create a fun game. And so we believe that our game will be closer to dynamic gameplay. And the reason why we've added the grappling hook, and again, let's be clear, there are a few very famous games in the game industry that are using grappling hooks. They can be Sekiro, recently a game called Just Cause that was very important in the open world field a few years ago. The topic here is not really about the way to move around in the map, because like I said, you'll be able to customize the game, but to send this message that we want very dynamic combat. And the best way to generate dynamic combat is obviously to record dynamic martial art, but also have a way to move at the same time as you're fighting. And by having a grappling hook that is actionable in the middle of the fight, it's a very simple way to express to our players that we will have dynamic fights. So let's think that it's a little bit if you're fighting Street Fighter against an enemy, but at the same time, you can press a button and get away from the screen thanks to your grappling hook. So this is really the message. And in a nutshell, we want to have a game that is, and also Amish insisted on this, we want to have a game that is respectful of ancient, traditional Indian martial art. And we also want to have a game that is performing well in the field in which we are, which is the action adventure or Souls-like RPG sub-segment. And in that sub-segment, we believe that there is room to have the position of a high speed, high pace, dynamic combat proposition.
Interesting. And from a world environment and story perspective, right? Um, is there Are there any elements about Indian epics or Indian history, culture that you think your game is bringing to life that other games already haven't?
So I'll let first Amish come with his perspective on this, and I'll conclude on, let's say, the market itself. But
Yeah.
let's have Amish on this vision, and I will add the competitive aspect once he has brought his perspective on this.
Dishant, the reality is actually nothing like this has ever been attempted, if you think about it. Uh, and what we are doing is we are setting up a fictional narrative within the world of our epics, within the world of our Itihas and Puranas. So imagine if that universe exists, the characters that we know and love are there, but as much bigger characters who may not have a role to play within the game, but we know of their existence. And you are in that world, within that construct, if you will. And we've set up a fictional narrative within that construct. So what happens is you get to be in that world, in the world of our Itihas and Puranas. The way time is, the way warfare happens, the kind of warfare, bows and arrows, and various things like this, right? But it's a fictional environment within that construct. So that's the way that we are approaching it. So in a sense, it is that ideal mix of a world that will be very familiar to you, because who doesn't know the stories of our epics, of the Rama and Mahabharata, the Puranas? Every Indian does, right? But it'll also be a fresh story within that, with fresh characters, right? But within that construct. That's how it's actually being built, which also brings in the style of warfare, the way choices are made. Uh, if you see in our traditional way, it's never a simplistic black and white. Things are complicated, things are nuanced. We are building in those complexities and nuances as well, which I think will make for a much richer experience. It won't be just a demon killing game. You actually get a richer experience because things are not going to be so simplistic. Choices are not going to be so simple. And of course, even the style of warfare, everything will be, true to that world, but in a very, very stylized way, in a very cool, hip way. Let's see that.
And so to wrap up on this, and to put it in perspective with other games, yes, like Amish said, nobody has attempted to do what we're doing, basically a deep AAA game with all sorts of biomes and environments based on Indian epics. And also, and again, here I'm going to be very technical, this is a dark fantasy action RPG, and we believe that facing all sorts of enemies and situations is interesting. But if you look at the images of the trailer, it's dark but with a glimpse of light. And if you look at the images, they are, and we worked a lot on that, the right balance between something that is colorful as India can be colorful, but also colorful as some very positive games can be, but also with a dark fantasy approach. And I mentioned the Dark Soul and the Souls-like subgenre. I believe there is an opportunity here to come with a game that is going to give you the pleasure of modern action-adventure games, but with an imagery that is going to be able to a larger audience. Like we said, my goal is not just to sell games in India, but also to a global audience. And I think there is an opportunity in the general action-adventure Souls-like segment to come with something that is not just new because it's based on Indian epics, but also that finds its own path between the light and the dark.
Very cool, guys. Look, I think we're almost about at time, right? And I think this
Mm.
conversation could go on for another 3 hours, but I won't keep you. Um, Let me just, ask a quick concluding question over here. I know this is still a ways off, but how are you thinking of monetization for this game? AAA games usually have a one price and then you're done with maybe some in-store purchases after, purely cosmetic or DLCs. But have you thought about this? How are you planning to turn this into money-making machine?
So I will give you a very simple answer. So The very good one is yes, because as you know, we haven't launched in the adventure of making an expensive game with lots of people without thinking about how to make our money back. But I will say those two things, and I will link them also to one element that we didn't discuss about. For me, it was very important to have a social aspect in the game. And so the trailer underlines this. The game is also playable in co-op, so you can play the game with friends. And just to be very clear, yes, this is a AAA game, so yes, it's a game with a price attached to it, and we believe that the biggest element of success on a game like that is the quality of the game, and we believe that if we have a very good, high-quality game, we will be able to convince people to pay the classic price in the AAA industry to buy the game in India, but also outside of India. However, to go and usually when people talk about monetization, they come with the question not just of day one, but how do you have also content on the long run? And so, yes, it would be a little bit too early to detail our plans after the delivery of the game. But from a creative perspective, what I would say is that being able to play and replay the game with your friends in co-op is a very important feature for the game creatively, because we want this game to be a game that you can play. If you're a kid, you can play the game with your parents. If you're a teenager, you can play the game with your friends. But it's a way for me to tease our perspective on the long run. And so we believe that this game is not just an opportunity to make a strong one-off, but also to actually have the opportunity for people in India and in the world to play in our world on the long run. I won't go here too much into the details, but I believe, and I say it like that, if people are interested by our project, be it on the creative side or even on the business side, we're always happy to talk to partners. But the big thing that they need to understand is that the untapped opportunity right now is gigantic. And it's not just because India is a big country. It's because at this stage, I don't think anybody is trying what we are trying to do, which is to create a vehicle to experience those crazy and exciting and centuries-old stories of Indian epics in the Age of Bharat.
Excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been absolutely great speaking with you. I'm really hoping and I'm very excited for what comes next. Nouredine, you've talked about Souls like. I'm thinking there's a Dark Souls element. You've talked about dark fantasy. I'm thinking there is a God of War element to this. You've talked about co-op, split fiction comes to mind. So, and of course there's the whole India take with Amish's perspective on this, voiced over by Amitabh Bachchan. So let me just say you guys have set the bar high. And all eyes are going to be on you guys to deliver, and we're rooting for you. We hope that this is going to be a big success, and I can't wait for the next alpha to be announced.
Thank you. Thanks, Risha.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.